So we'd like to welcome everybody as we gather together. We had a 1 week hiatus last week and just a brief thing looking forward also. At the end of March, we'll be taking a 1 week off as well during Holy Week. So the last Thursday of March, we will not be having Bible on Holy Week as we go forward. That's a little ways off, but you got it, especially since we are in Lent. And especially for everybody that's watching online, you'll notice that this week we've got the screen up here. Basically, following our Bible study, pretty quickly, we have our worship service right here in the same place. So I've got the screen back there. It's already the worship service. I've got that up and going so that when it's time for the worship service to start, not long after the Bible study, we're ready. So that's what the screen back there going on is all about. And so it'll probably be going on with a whole bunch of little trivia type stuff in scripture for the rest of the Bible study. So any questions as we get started? Okay, we're at 2 Samuel chapter 3, starting at verse 26. So in essence, just a reminder exactly where we're at. Basically, Saul died at the end of 1 Samuel. And then 2 Samuel 1 through 5 is basically then goes from the death of King Saul as king of Israel, all of the tribes, to the end of chapter 5, where David is now king of the United Kingdom as well, of all of the northern and the southern tribes. Remembering that Solomon will inherit that. And then as soon as Solomon's son tries to take the throne, by his actions, that's what causes the split in Israel to the northern tribes and the southern tribes. But sometimes we get the idea that it just suddenly happened. But no, this was always the case. So we're kind of seeing right here at 2 Samuel 3, even before David's reign, you had this division taking place in Israel of the northern tribes and the southern tribes. And then you've got 40 years of David's reign, 40 years of Solomon's reign, and you still have this division going on and taking place. You could think to a certain degree, you had the Civil War going on in the United States. And how long do people still think of you've got the South and the North? You still have that demarcation, don't you? I think I remember when I was in Texas, basically anybody north of Oklahoma was a Yankee. And so Minnesota, boy, was I Yankee. So you still have that today. And let's see here, that's been about 150 years now. And you still have that difference that's thought of in our culture, right?
But you were a Minnesotan before, anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yep. But going down there, being from Minnesota, I was a Yankee. So even Missouri is up north. Whereas from us, you got those Southerners down in Iowa. Those Southerners in Iowa, they got that accent, right? Just if I say the divisions and those things keep taking place. And so if you still have that today, to a certain degree in the United States, it's not surprising. 2 kings, 80 years, that is more than a generation, but you would still have that going on in Israel too. Now, what's going on right now when we're in chapter 3 is civil war. That's why I brought that image up in American history of the Civil War, because there is a civil war that is happening. And you have basically King David, and you have one of the 2 last remaining of King David's son, or King Saul's sons. So you have David and 2 sons left of King Saul. Now, the second son, that'll come forward. And that'll especially be a big thing when we get to chapter 9. Maybe we'll get there before Easter. We'll see. Right now, we're talking of the last remaining, you could say, healthy king. I mean, physically healthy and able to get around and stuff. And this king, want to get the name right because it's going to be important coming up here in just a bit. Ishbosheth is the gentleman's name. And he is the last remaining one really to be able to take the throne of King Saul. Why not the other one? We'll get to that. So now, just before 26, you had Ishbosheth and Abner go completely head-to-head over power. Ishbosheth sees Abner as taking power and authority. So there's the accusation. Whether it's true or not, we don't know. It might be, it might not be. Where Abner was basically the power behind the throne and was kind of setting himself up to be the de facto king. And the accusation was that Abner had taken one of Saul's concubines, that was now Ishbosheth's concubines, and taken that person as his own. Which is, in essence, if that were true, whether it is or not, we don't know. But if that were true, then Abner would be basically trying to say, I'm going to put myself in the line to be king in the line of Saul. That would have been the power move going on. I mean, the thought process is very foreign to us. But when you're in a day and far too many view women as just what you own, that's some of the thought process that takes place. And you definitely had some of that going on. So with that power struggle, now Abner says, I will leave you and I will go join King David. And David welcomes him on. And he says, come on, help me to unite the kingdom. You'll be part of this. The problem is that Joab, one of the leaders with King David, is not at all pleased because Abner killed his brother. Now, the whole story that we had been given was very much that Abner had been trying not to kill Joab's brother. He had run away and said, go back. He kept running, said, go back. Don't do this. I don't want to hurt you. And then the text actually tells us when it finally came to blows, he tried to hit Joab's brother with the butt of the spear. If you're trying to kill someone, you kill them with the pointy end. You don't try to kill them with the butt end. But the text says that he hit him and it actually went in and through and killed him. So it was hard, but he was trying not to. Nevertheless, Abner's hand was the one that killed Joab's brother. Thus we come here to verse 26. So before we get to that, any kind of thoughts or questions, just remembering the whole line of what brings us to this point. Okay, so we're going to read portions of this. And let's read this next paragraph, which is 26 through 30. Clockwise or counterclockwise? Well, you said you don't care, so we'll go counter, or we'll go clockwise. So we'll give you the first one. That chapter, 26, or that paragraph.
26 through 30?
Yep.
When Joab came out from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sarah. But David did not know about it. And when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into the midst of the gate to speak with him privately, and there he struck him in the stomach, so that he died, for the blood of Asher, his brother. After when David heard of it, he said, I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before the Lord, for the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. May it fall upon the head of Joab and upon all his father's house, and may the house of Joab never be without one who has a discharge, or who is leprous, or who holds a spindle, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks bread. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner because he had put their brother Abishai to death in the battle of Gibeon.
So you had the battle that happened. Abner had killed him. Now Abner was going to be David's way of getting everybody together. And so Abner, we're going to get this leader from Saul's household, and he's going to help, and he's going to bring it together, and we're going to bring peace, right? So we're going to stop this warfare, because this warfare had been going on for almost 3 years. So this was not we're going to be angry and have one battle. This was a constant battle. And remembering from last week, as this constant battle was happening over years, you had more and more power going to David. So David was becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. And as David kept getting stronger, obviously then the house of Saul kept getting weaker. And people outside of this saw that. That'll come up when we get to chapter 5. And so you had this happening. And now that basically the power behind the throne is going over to David, what's David hoping is going to happen very quickly? This is going to be done. So let this be done quickly. We can stop this civil war. We can stop this fighting and be at peace with one another. No. That didn't happen because of vengeance. So you killed my brother, therefore I will kill you, no matter what the king says. And all of that. And so you get they do it by trickery. Yes, you're following David. So come on over here. We need to talk. Don't let King David know. Otherwise, he might stop it. So let's come over here and talk. And it's kind of you all know Shakespeare play Julius Caesar and Et tu, Brute and all that, right? Where he comes forward and he gets stabbed in Rome, basically surrounded by the senators. Here, basically, you're coming and you're surrounded by the political people that were there for King David's, except for King David. And they do kind of the same thing as they come forward. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Well, you're dead. Okay, we're done with our conversation. That's pretty much what happened. And then David here, and David does the next right things coming forward, but he does put the curse on Joab's house. So as we continue to go through 2 Samuel, do you think there'll be any mention of this? Yeah, there will be mention of this as we go forward. And that's a pretty nasty curse that King David puts down on that household, isn't it? The curse of leprosy, of falling by the sword, of being hungry. In other words, being a poor, destitute family. And this will constantly take place in their household with sickness, disease, right, or lack of food. So not barely enough to survive. At least some always in the household, which is a pretty harsh curse there, isn't it? But they had gone against David's will. And by killing Abner, what was the result that would happen immediately? Other people would die too. Because with Abner being able to try to bring everybody together, you can bring the war to cessation a lot quicker. Now that he's dying, what could easily happen? It keeps on going, right? So just thinking of, let's say, of the Ukraine and the things that are taking place there. If peace could happen, and let's say that there was one person that could suddenly bring about peace within the next month, right there, That would be pretty awesome. That would be pretty incredible. Now, if that one person who was able to bring peace into the Ukraine was then assassinated, what would be the end result? It'd keep on going, right? And that's kind of the big thing that David wants to stop. Let's stop this from keeping on going. So there, it is a pretty massive curse, but the curse is brought on because not just because they killed Abner, but because this meant that more bloodshed was going to happen and take place. And so that's, and did Joab know that? Yes. He absolutely knew that that would be the result of what he did. And he still went forward and did it. So that's, any kind of thoughts on those verses right there?
It's hard to understand sometimes, but you have to put yourself in that place and decide what you will do if something like that happened in your own family.
And I can't imagine the anger, but, and this is part of what's going on here as it goes forward, which is more important? My anger and my desire for what I think of as justice, or more bloodshed? Which is more important? Obviously, and this is part of what's going on here, is you're getting this image that's brought forward. More and more bloodshed is not the answer. We should be willing, and the thought by the curse here is to let everybody else know, giving up your feeling for being right is much more important when balanced with the needs of the entire country. Respect like this. Was it the second Star Trek movie where you get to Spock? And he says that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And so in this case, that would be accurate, where the needs of the many to stop this war outweighs by far my need for the feeling of justice. And in the whole text, Abner was trying not to kill him. And did Joab know that? Yes. Otherwise, it wouldn't be put into the text here. And he still went forward and did it. And so his feelings were preeminent over anything else. How often is that what takes place in war? And so you can see where the Lord, so why this massive curse on his family? So that there would be this remembrance by this family that this is not the way to go about it. Sometimes a curse is put forward for a warning to other people that this is not the way for it to go forward. So now we see in the next verses what David's next steps are to do. So let's read verse 31 through 34.
And David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn before Abner. And King David followed the bier. They buried Abner at Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of
Abner. Oh, must be the next page. Sorry.
I'm stuck.
Refreshing.
The grave of Abner, and all the people wept, and the king lamented for Abner, saying, should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands are not bound, your feet are not fettered. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen. And all the people wept again over him.
Now you notice, especially right there at the beginning, and David gave this curse to his family, right? And then they had just killed Abner. the thought is, I have killed him. I have gotten my justice. Therefore, I am right and I have succeeded, right? And then David said to, and you notice how it says, David said to Joab and to all the people. Now, Joab, you just killed this man. Guess what? You are now going to mourn over this man. And so you are going to put on sackcloth. You are going to put on ashes. And you are going to mourn before the man you just killed. Think of the sight that would be for everybody that knew what was going on. You just killed him. You are now going to mourn over the death of the one that you thought you were righteous. To a certain degree, I guess you could say that's a warning also about righteous anger. I am right. Therefore, I am okay to hurt this person because I am in the right. Or in this case, to kill that person because I am in the right. No, Joab, you are going to lead the mourning along with me as we go forward. I can't think of anything much more humbling at that moment than that you are called on to do that. So putting on sackcloth. And sackcloth doesn't say ashes here, but that's kind of usually the connection. Putting on sackcloth, putting on ashes, ripping the robe, mourning over the person who has just died. And then David followed as they carried and brought Abner to Hebron and buried him. And then you've got this public weeping. You got this public mourning, this public outcry that happens. Among the Jewish Hebrew people, there is at many funerals throughout history, you would actually hire mourners for the funeral. So as you're there, you would actually hire people to come to the funeral in order to bring forward the sound of weeping and lamenting and all this that has happened. David didn't hire anybody, did he? He was the one that went forward and did the weeping, the lamenting, and the crying out for all of the things that had just happened and taken place. And also, and the king lamented for Abner, saying, now, you all know they didn't have cell phones back in the day, so this was not a YouTube type thing. So you could say, how in the world do we have that poem that's right there? David wrote the poem down. And where it ended up, we're not sure, but it definitely ended up here in 2 Samuel. And so David then wrote this poem for Abner. That should say a lot for about what's going on. And with all of this, with this weeping, this mourning, this lamenting, this making Joab to come forward and all of that, is it probably exactly true what's going on in David's heart? Probably. It was probably also all of what had to happen in order to let everybody know that King David had not killed Abner. So in other words, I'm not the one. Abner had gone off to all the other tribes of Israel. And he had said, let's lay down the swords. Let's get back together. Let's not fight. Let's stop this civil war. And then this man is now dead. So now what is the next right thing to do? Make as public and a showing that I did not kill this man. I did not make this happen. And so let's not make all of his work go to naught. Praise. And that's what he's bringing forward. And basically then saying that Abner died by trickery, but not on the battlefield, which I'm sure is if Abner were to die, that's where he would have wanted to die, as he was a military man and would have preferred to die in that manner, knowing the other statements that he had. So any other kind of thoughts before we finish up this chapter? Let's read the rest of the chapter, 35 to 39.
Then all the people came to persuade David to eat bread while it was yet day. But David swore, saying, God do so to me and more also if I taste bread or anything else until the sun goes down. And all the people took notice of it, and it pleased them as everything that the king did pleased all the people. So all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's will to put to death Abner the son of Ner. And the king said to his servants, do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? And I was gentle today, O anointed king. These men, the sons of Zeruiah, are more severe than I. The Lord repay the evildoer according to his wickedness.
And so you can see kind of all the things that transpiring right there. So he is in mourning. He's probably getting faint. That's why they're saying, please eat some bread. Please. And he says, no, we will mourn until the sun goes down. Now, if the king is not eating bread, what does that then say for everybody else? Nobody else is eating bread either. So if the king is saying we are going to mourn like this until the sun goes down, I'm going to do this. You are all going to do this too. It is very much what's going on. So, okay, until the sun goes down, we will continue this mourning. And you notice all of this happened, so everybody knew this is not David that put him to death, so that the civil war would not keep on going. And you notice what David does. David has mercy. There's the curse that's on his family, right? But as king, what could David have easily done? You are removed, you and all your household. And in fact, a couple of places that happens when the person comes forward and says, I finished off King Saul. What happened to that man? He was removed because he was basically had killed the Lord's anointed. Later on, we're going to see that happen again, where one of the Lord's anointed, the one trying to continue on in the throne of Saul, this takes place, and he is eliminated. But you notice right here, David is showing mercy and basically saying, everybody, let's stop this and let's have mercy on one another. Passages like this very rightly point us to how Jesus went about what he did. One of Sophia's favorite parts of the liturgy is the Kyrie. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Joab, all David had to say is, you're gone. And he would never have seen that Joab again or his family in life. That's all he had to say. But instead, he had mercy on him, which Joab did not have on Abner, right? And really, when you think about it, which is part of the point here, Abner had tried to show some mercy as the guy was following him, right? Go away, hit him with the butt of the spear. And then it did happen. So he was trying to show mercy by go away and you don't die. Instead, he kept on coming. Joab was having none of that, right? It was, I will not show mercy. I will kill you. And he made it happen. And now you have David showing mercy again. So when we have all of this that Jesus follows in the line and the lineage of David, these are the images that Jesus is very much pointing towards, the mercy that he shows towards us. But when it comes to judgment and justice, the Lord will repay. Could David have repaid him? Rightfully. Yeah. Because justice is that kind of justice, jail or whatever you would call, is given to the government. The government has the official right, the legal right, and the moral right that if you are speeding 90 miles per hour in a 55, you will get fined if the police catch you, right? And yet people that go 90 in a 55 are upset with the police for catching them, right? even though they know they are completely in the wrong. And yet, every once in a while, mercy is shown. I remember my wife gave the story. She was distracted as she was driving because the three kiddos were being loud. We'll put it that way. And she was going 6 or 7 miles over the speed limit, something of that nature. And then she got pulled over. The police officer comes up, says, "Do you know what's going on? Do you know why I pulled you over?" Her answer was, my guess would be that I was speeding, but I was completely distracted as the kids were. And the police officer looks back and, "I understand. Go along."
It's been a long time.
Well, this was several years ago too.
It was early in the morning. I was at the office by 7:00,
Yep.
and the post office opened at 8, I think, in a kind of a rural area. And so I thought, okay, I'm not gonna go the freeway. I'm gonna take the back roads. So I took the back roads, and it happened to be in a residential area. And I didn't see any sign for the speed limit, but I was going over the speed limit, and he followed me about 3 or 4 blocks and then put on his lights. But he didn't give me a ticket.
Wow.
I told him, I said, I didn't see any sign. I said, I was on my way to the post office. He said, well, okay, slow down.
Yep. Now, could he have thrown the book at you?
He could.
Yes. Instead, in that case, he showed mercy, right? And
I thought I was gonna start to cry.
and yet you were guilty.
I was, absolutely.
And that's what the same thing here. King David had every right to throw the book at him. And instead, he showed Joab mercy. And it's especially notable, he showed Joab mercy when Joab was not willing to show mercy. That's some pretty incredible mercy there. Other thoughts as we wrap up chapter 3 here? Now, chapter 4 is only 12 verses, so I think we'll be able to get through chapter 4 today. But that brings my turn. So I've got the first 3 verses here. Now, all of this happened. Now the scene shifts to Ishbosheth. Remember, he is the son of Saul, who's now, the civil war, and he's on the other side of the civil war from David. When Ishbosheth, Saul's son, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, his courage failed, and all Israel was dismayed. Now Saul's son had 2 men who were captains of raiding bands. The name of the one was Banah, the name of the other was Rechab, sons of Rimmon, a man of Benjamin from Beroth. Beroth was also counted part of Benjamin. The Berothites fled to Githim and have been sojourners there to this day. So in other words, Saul's son hears of this, and now Abner has died. He probably had the thought, well, maybe I can get him to come back. Now, that will not happen. That has ended. And kind of just interesting there, his courage failed. And the actual Hebrew is not courage failed. It's his hand became feeble, is how the idiom goes in Hebrew. So his hands became weak, which means his courage failed. So that's kind of what we do in English. That's how we understand his courage failed. But the Hebrew gives a very visual. So it's kind of like all this is done and he's died. I can't do anything more. It is done. It is just over. That gives a little bit more of a visual image, doesn't it? Of kind of just it's done. So it has happened. And you also notice the words there. His hands became feeble, and all Israel was dismayed. And with all Israel being dismayed, that's talking about basically the northern tribes. This is looking forward to that time where you have the division that takes place, and you have the tribes of Israel, and you have the tribes of Judah that take place with Solomon's son when the division happens. Here, though, all Israel is dismayed. Okay, it is done. So it's kind of like, okay, now what do we do? And especially now that the king has basically given up, it is done. I was watching the girls' hockey tournament a little bit yesterday. It was yesterday. So much happens. It's like, yeah, that was yesterday. But I was watching a little bit of the hockey tournament one time, one team, and it just it was a battle, and they were playing hard and all of that, and it was up to 2-0, and they were still playing hard. Everything happened, and then it became 3-0. And the moment that third one went in, you had a fourth goal take place within 45 seconds, and a fifth goal take place within 2 minutes. And this was all in the third period. So they had gone over 2 periods out of 3 periods, fighting hard, working hard, strong, and then all of us, and it was a close game. And then all of a sudden, that third one goes in, and now you're down 3-1. And all of a sudden, your hands become feeble. And the next thing you know, you're down 5-1. And the game ended up, or 5-0. Game ended up 6-1 was the final. But all of a sudden, this all happened. You get hit hard, and then it's gone. And there is no more coming back at that point. And that's where all of this has kind of happened. The king has thrown in the towel. It is done. And now you get these other 2 gentlemen that'll be brought up. When we get to the 3rd paragraph of chapter 4, they'll come up again. But a minute ago, I had brought up about the 2 sons, right? You had the one son, Ishbosheth, right here. Now we're going to have verse 4, and verse 4 is going to look forward to chapter 9. So let's read verse 4.
Verse 4. Jonathan, the son of Saul, had a son who was crippled in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. And his nurse took him up and fled. And as she fled in her haste, he fell and became lame. And his name was
Good luck. Mephibosheth. And you can kind of see the connection. You have Mephibosheth and Ishbosheth. So you can kind of see the connections taking place there. And so you had the 2 sons, Ishbosheth, and you had Mephi. We'll just give him a nickname there, right? So you got Mephi. But he was being taken away. Nurse fell. He fell. He didn't have our modern hospitals and all the technology we have. So as the baby probably fell and fell onto him, such that his feet became lame and really couldn't use it anymore. Now, in those days especially, you have somebody that can't do the work anymore. They appear lame, so therefore they must be weak. Are they weak? It doesn't matter. People will view that person as weak because his feet can't hold him up. Now, just to kind of with going into our own history in the United States, when you had to World War II, there was a lot when can't believe his name popped out of my head. President during World War II. Roosevelt. There we go. I had Kennedy in my head and it was not leaving. Roosevelt. And then Roosevelt eventually was confined to a wheelchair, right? And yet, especially for quite a while, they tried to do everything they could think of to hide it. Why?
Because they thought it made him weak.
Exactly. And you're not going back too far in our history.
Actually, I think people who have handicaps like that are stronger than those of us who don't have,
To a
because they have to live with it.
thing is, you're going to reality,
Yeah.
and so I would agree with you. When somebody has to go through that, they have to go through a lot more obstacles just for daily stuff than somebody that doesn't. And there's a lot to be said for that. There's a lot to be said about that. Yet, how does the world view somebody that would have a handicap? You are weak, or you are weaker than everybody else that's around you. And so that's why Jonathan here, or the son of Jonathan, that's why Mephi here, is never going to be king, because he can't walk. His feet are lame. So he can't be, because everybody will view him as weak, including other kings. And that is a real part here. If the other kings view you as weak, guess what's going to happen? You got it. They're going to come on in after you. And so they view you as, because you are weak. So there is a bit of truth into that. Nevertheless, this is looking forward to chapter 9. Now remember, when this is written, people will have known these stories. So the fact that it's like 5 chapters down the road, that really doesn't matter a whole lot. 5 chapters down the road, they know the story of who this is. The story, when we get to chapter 9, is David, after he consolidates everything within Israel, and he will have it basically consolidated when we get to the end of chapter 5. He then consolidates the far borders all around Israel. And David does that work. Now, once he has consolidated, he then asks, is there anybody left of the household of King Saul? And the answer would be, there's this man over here who has been crippled since he was a baby. So what David does is he then takes the last remaining person of the household of Saul, and he brings him in to the palace and takes care of him for the rest of his days. Now, usually, what do you seek to do when you have taken over a country from somebody else? You eliminate that family, right? You try to kill every last person in that family. Therefore, they can't come up and rise against you. That's sad fact of history in the world. Here, with Mephi here, what does he say? David has mercy, completely undeserved mercy. Mercy different from all the countries that are around him. Every other country, find the rest of his family, kill them, make my throne secure for me and us going forward. That's basically all the other countries. That would have been King Saul. That's what Saul was doing, right? David is of the heart of the Lord, and he shows mercy that's completely undeserved. He didn't do anything to say, like me, King David. David shows mercy. And that's why this whole part is about the mercy that David showed. And at times, he did not show mercy. He shows mercy where it's completely undeserved here. But when someone goes against the Lord's anointed in order to be king, and that person is killed because the Lord has put them in that place, those are the times when David then says, this person needs to be executed, and they are killed. But he does show mercy even then by not killing everybody in that single household. So you can kind of see what's going on as these two comparisons are being made. But here, David wanted to show Ishbosheth mercy. And how do we know that? He showed mercy to his brother later on. That's why we know David's intentions were to forgive and make this all okay. And again, with all of this, this is showing God's mercy towards us. So let's go to the next verses here. Verse 5 through 10. I have no idea. Okay, thank you.
Now the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, Rahab and Baanah set out, and about the heat of the day they came to the house of Ishbosheth as he was taking his noonday rest. And they came into the midst of the house as if to get weight, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and Baanah, his brother, escaped. When they came into the house, as he lay on his bed in the bedroom, they struck him and put him to death and beheaded him. They took his head and went by the way of the Arabah all night, and brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron. And they said to the king, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life. The Lord has avenged my lord the king this day on Saul and his offspring." But David answered Rechab and Baanah his brother, the sons of Rimmon and Beerothite, "As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life out of every adversity, when one told me, 'Behold, Saul is dead,' and thought he was bringing good news. I seized him and killed him at Ziklag, which was the reward I gave him for his news."
And so the comparison is being made with the one that killed Saul and the one that killed Saul's son. Now, you can see their thought process, right? They saw the writing on the wall. They saw the tribes of Israel starting to follow David. They saw what David had done. They saw that Abner was dead. They had seen throughout this civil war that Israel was getting weaker and weaker, and David was getting stronger and stronger. So they saw what was happening, right? So basically what they were doing is, we are losing. Let's go on to the winning side. So let's just hop over here. So how can we, who have been fighting against David for 3 years, 2.5 years or so, how can we get into his good graces? Well, let's bring him the head of Ishbosheth. And then here, see, and you notice they say the Lord did this, right? And they may have thought this was the will of the Lord. They were wrong, but they may have thought that this was the will of the Lord. Because in reality, all of this happening, they started to follow David. They then did follow Solomon. But this feelings and these things that happen last for generations, don't they? Out of all the things that happened in the Civil War, that Lincoln was assassinated was very well remembered in the North as time went along. Now, if Lincoln, and this is just knowing what was going on, if Lincoln had stayed as president, he probably, according to the writings that we have, would have been more lenient to the South. Instead, we were pretty harsh on the South after the Civil War. And without getting into all the what's it, why is it, and all of those type of things. What was David wanting to do? He was wanting to be more lenient to the people in order to bring everything together. But with more and more bloodshed, these things last in people's memory. And even though it was not the South that assassinated Lincoln, it was somebody that wanted to finish and to get it last thing that caused all that to happen. And so here you have King David, and they bring the head of Ishbosheth and say, "See, the Lord brought it. Here's the head." Seems really gruesome, actually. And it's just it's a weird picture in the head of, let's put this person's head into a blanket and then carry it all night long, go before the king, and then roll this head out, and just seems so strange. But it was their proof. He was dead, and dead at our hands. And here you'd had David already showing mercy. But for the killing of the Lord's anointed and of that family, you have then the same punishment that's going to be brought against them. So let's get the last. We got two more little pieces here. Actually, one more piece as we wrap up chapter 4. So let's read the rest of the chapter.
How much more, when wicked men have killed a righteous man in his own house on his bed, shall I not now require his blood at your hand and destroy you from the earth? And David commanded his young men, and they killed them and cut off their hands and feet and hanged them beside the pool of Hebron. But they took up the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner in Hebron.
So you have this, again, gory piece that happens there. Why did he hang them and have these and have their hands and feet cut off? It goes back to Deuteronomy 21, 22 through 23. That basically said when a person has this done to them, it is a divine curse in the punishment. And so by doing this action, he's going back to Deuteronomy and he's saying, this is the Lord's curse against you. Now, this is the curse of the Lord against them, but you notice who all is killed and who is not killed, right? You have these two men killed. The two men who did this and brought the head before David. Who is not killed? David does not go after the families, does he? He does not say, okay, well, you've done this. Now the rest of your family will all suffer and we will wipe them from the face of the earth. So while this action has to happen, as king, David rightfully could have done that. Instead, he shows mercy to those families. So while you have this, and so this divine curse brought upon them, you definitely have David's mercy shown towards all of their family, which again was completely undeserved. Mercy, grace, all of these parts when they go here are showing to a smaller degree how great is the grace and mercy God has shown to us in Jesus Christ. Because what did God have to do for our sins to be washed away? His son had to go to the cross, right? Now, knowing that this is all our fault, and collective and individual, that's all our fault that Jesus had to go to the cross. God, in justice, could have rightfully said, you all must pay for what had to happen. Instead, what does God show us? He shows us grace and mercy because of what Jesus did on the cross. And this gets some of those emotions that are in there. My brother was dead by Abner's hand, yet mercy is shown. You could have been very angry. You, your whole household, gone, eliminated, taken care of. Instead, you still have mercy shown upon their wives, their kids, and all of their extended family going forward. And so while there's harsh things, really, this is about David's mercy. Because he could have gone a lot further. And legally gone a lot further. Because the moment that Ishbosheth was dead, David was the de facto king of everything. He could have done anything at that moment. And David's gut reaction, this is the heart of the Lord. David's gut reaction was as much as he could to show mercy. And what is the love of God for us? His gut reaction is in Jesus Christ to give us that mercy. Any last thoughts before we wrap up chapter 4, knowing that chapter 5 is going to be now the uniting of the kingdom, and then the protecting and borderizing of the kingdom? Any thoughts here looking at David's mercy on God's people? Let's end with a prayer. Lord God, Heavenly Father, we thank and praise your name for every gift and blessing you give to us. Especially we praise you for the mercy that you have shown. Help us, Lord, throughout this Lenten season to remember how great and grievous are our sins, and how great and incredible is your grace and mercy. In your name we pray. Amen.